We talk about how Europeans view and evaluate democracy, and after a short introduction, we present you three types of empirical data. Data on the long-term trends in satisfaction with democracy, data on the views of democracy, and data on evaluations of democracy, and then we have a short conclusion. The introduction. There can be two stories told about democracy, as David Runciman, in a recent book about democracy, has observed. On the one hand, you can tell a success story. On the other hand, you can tell a story of pessimism and fear. The success story, of course, points to the fact that democracy is a universal value, which has spread in the third wave of democratization all over the world. The story of pessimism and fear points to the fact that many of these new democracies have not really consolidated, and that even in established democracies, democracies challenged today, to the point that in a recent title story, The Economist asks, what has gone wrong with democracy? Now, how about Eastern Europeans? Do we tell a success story, or do we tell a story of pessimism and fear? We tell the story based on two types of data. The first set of data has been around for a long time. It's Eurobarometer studies, which ask a simple single question.
Very simple.
Yes, very simple. How satisfied are you with how democracy works in your own country? This question allows us to compare Eastern Europeans, Southern and Western Europeans, and it allows us to compare Eastern Europeans in the 11 member states which had been candidate states before and which had been answering these questions already as candidate states. We have a second set of data which is brand new. It has just come out for 29 European countries and neighboring countries, among which 8 of the 11 Eastern European member states, plus Albania, Kosovo, Russia, and Ukraine. It's the ESS round number 6, which has been in the field in the fall 2012. The ESS, which we shall talk about at length, has two assumptions. The first assumption is democracy is a multidimensional concept, and there is the basic model of liberal democracy, which can in turn be divided up in different components, and there is something like social democracy, referring to social justice, and there is something like direct democracy, visions going beyond the basic model. And the second assumption of the ESS is that it talks about views and evaluations of democracy. So how people make sense of democracy, what do they think is very important for democracy, and on the other hand, how do they assess democracy in their own country on the different dimensions for both types of perspectives. Now, the first type of results after this short introduction, the long-term trends of satisfaction with democracy. The question is simple, but it gives you a general idea. From 1990 to 2013, for the Eastern European candidate countries, there is a gap between 1995 and 2002. I show you three regions of Europe: Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, and Northwestern Europe. That's the way it looks. You have the uppermost line is Northwestern Europe, so the Northwestern Europeans are much more satisfied with democracy than the Southern and the Eastern Europeans. If you look at the Southern Europeans, they have become more satisfied with democracy in the 2000s, but since the crisis, their satisfaction drops precipitously. Now, the Eastern Europeans have been more satisfied right after the transition, but they lost satisfaction in democracy as they became democratic countries. And in particular, and I don't know why, they had an accession blues. So just at the moment when they acceded to Europe, they were particularly unsatisfied with democracy. And then they reached a higher point at the beginning of the crisis, and since then they lost satisfaction again with democracy. Here you have the different countries, and you have 3 countries where the decline of satisfaction right after the transition was really impressive: Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Lithuania. In Lithuania, the satisfaction eroded linearly all the time. You have Poland, which is highly strange for me. I don't know why. The accession blues was really tremendous in Poland. After the accession, satisfaction increased again in Poland. And third, you have the Czech Republic and Slovenia, where the crisis had a real impact on satisfaction, much more than in the other Eastern European countries. So I just can give you this description. I don't know what is behind this description. I think you might give us some hints in the discussion. Now, the Eastern Europeans' views on democracy, our second point. There is the basic model of liberal democracy, which is shared by all the Europeans. And this model constitutes a hierarchical scale. What you see here are 12 components of liberal democracy, which range from the most important component at the bottom, that is equality before the law, which is considered to be extremely important by more than 2/3 of all the Europeans. Then comes free and fair elections. Still more than half of the Europeans consider this extremely important. And then that goes down until the last 3 items, parties offering alternatives, citizens discussing policies before they vote, and government's responsibility with respect to other European governments, which are considered extremely important by less than 1/3 of the Europeans. Now, the very important point is this model is the same, and the hierarchy of the items is virtually the same in each and every European country. So the Eastern Europeans have the same basic liberal model as the Western Europeans and as the Southern Europeans. So similarity with respect to the model. I just said that, but variation with respect to country means. So there is a variation between, the whole scale has 12 items. You can consider 0 items extremely important up to 12 items. The average in Albania is 8.7. So the Albanians consider almost every item extremely important. The Slovaks, 3.7. That's the lowest average in Eastern Europe. In Western Europe, there are even countries with lower averages like Belgium, the Netherlands, or Finland.
Hanspeter, can I introduce something? When they asked Albanians whether they frequently feel European, 80% said yes. They also win the prize for feeling European as well as comprehensive understanding of democracy.
Don't undermine my results.
Okay, sorry.
So, as I already said, there are 2 visions going beyond the basic model. On the one hand, this social justice idea, which we have operationalized with just 2 items: protection against poverty and reduction of income inequality, and an index for direct democracy, which is operationalized with just 1 item: voting is important on important political issues in referendums. Now, question for you. Which countries have the higher averages? Which countries expect more from democracy? Is it poor quality democracies or is it high quality democracies? I mean, the general idea is what Werber says here, much of what people believe about the political process is learned from observations of that process. So we think that what people expect from democracy is endogenous to their experiences with democracy. And the question is, what do people learn in which type of democracy? On the one hand, there is a modernization theory, there is participatory theory of democracy. They point to rising aspirations. So in high-quality democracies, people expect more in terms of democracy, which would mean that there is a positive relationship between the quality of democracy and what people expect. On the other hand, there is also the dissatisfaction or critical citizen hypothesis. In democracies which are performing poorly, citizens are highly dissatisfied and expect more in terms of control of the government, in terms of participation rights. They want more than the poor quality than they get. They are critical citizens. So what is right? What I show you first are the means of the three indices in the three regions, which we showed you before. And the means are on the scale standardized from 0 to 1, so they are comparable across the three dimensions. And what you see is, lo and behold, it's not rising aspirations, it's critical citizens, it's dissatisfied citizens who want more. So Southern Europeans, Central and Eastern Europeans want more liberal democracy in terms of liberal democracy than Western Europeans. They want more in terms of social justice than Western Europeans, and they want more in terms of direct democracy than Western Europeans. I show you in this second part of the results one last slide, which is more precise than this threefold regional classification. I show you the relationship between the quality of democracy in a given country as measured by World Bank indicators. The World Bank has governance indicators which take into account a whole lot of aspects of how democracy works. And I show you the average expectation per country as a function of the quality measured by the World Bank, and this is what you get. So the relationship is always very negative. It's most negative in terms of social justice, it's somewhat less negative in terms of direct democracy, and even a bit less negative than liberal democracy. But in all three dimensions, people in countries with poorly performing democracies expect more in terms of democracy. They want more democracy, they want more social justice, they want more direct democracy. You see the Albanians, as Philip says, the Albanians are extreme. They are always on top of everything, but you see also the Kosovars, who are also Albanians, the Ukrainians and the Russians expect a lot, demand a lot, whereas the Dutch, the Finns and the Belgians expect and demand very little. Now it's Alex's.